Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Two Man Game here on Claibs Online. I'm Bob Ramsey. That is Matt Rocchio. Well, Matt, it's great to see you. The NBA season is finally over, and I'm not sure. I think we got another game wrong, but
We did.
I think we hit on some of the topics, though, and some of the keys that maybe didn't go the way we thought, but we knew those were the key elements in that final game. I really thought the Celtics would take care of business at home, and then I was ready to predict the Warriors would win at home and win in seven. And the Warriors just said, "Let's get it over with."
Yeah, when a championship team like the Warriors kind of decides to put their foot on your neck and finish it off, it just looks different. And that's kind of what we saw on Thursday. You know, it felt like a team that had been there before, showing another team kind of, this is how you do it. This is how you close things out. That's kind of what it felt
Right.
like. Stephen Curry came up, had 34 points. Draymond Green comes up 2 assists short of a triple double in game seven. They get enough from Clay and Wiggins just to kind of close it out. It really is kind of insane how illustrative that game was in kind of the larger kind of arc that we've seen from the Warriors. And then when you look at the Celtics, almost everything in that game kind of plays out with kind of how we had talked about that series. Whereas if you can play good defense, you can rebound hard, you can take care of the ball, very basic basketball tenets, you're going to win a championship. But again, just another game where they're turning the ball over too many times. They had 22 by the end of it in game six. You're not going to be able to win many basketball games that way. And I think we talked in really January, maybe even earlier than that, right when the Celtics started turning things around. And my big criticism was them with not having a true point guard. And that kind of ended up being something that kind of bit them a little bit.
Yep.
And so it's, there's a lot of things that we can get into, and there's a lot of things from that series you can drill down into. Again, we talked about a lot of them. How are they playing the Curry, high pick and roll? How are they guarding Tatum? How are they, how are they letting him be a playmaker? Are they forcing him to be a scorer? You can look at all those things, and yeah, they affected different parts of the game. But it's kind of crazy that in 2022, with all these intense variables and analytics and crazy numbers and things like that, you can still get down to a series that was decided in a lot of ways by who turned the ball over and who didn't. And it's in one of the crazy ways, a lot of these numbers and a lot of these analytics still gets down to possessions. And if you don't control the possessions, you're not going to be able to win the game. And I think we saw that across those 6 games.
Yeah, I know a lot of folks nationally want to make Jayson Tatum a scapegoat. We could be biased because we're in St. Louis, and maybe we are a little biased, certainly rooting for him. He's had better games. But when we talk about turnovers and we talk about Tatum's performance, I think analysts make a mistake often and not in just discrediting the team that messes up and not giving credit for at least some of the cause to the opposition.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think there's always a balance of which do you give more credit to, but there is the answer is that it's a balance.
Yeah, and when it goes to those turnovers, my experience has been in the college game for many years, and after you've got a dozen or so games in, you start to see trends that are your team makeup, your team personality. Okay, so the Celtics turn the ball over a lot, but when the chips are down, not being able to control something that's controllable for even one game, that to me, that shines a light on a bigger problem. And I think you touched on it. So let me go to the next question then. And will Boston work to get a would-be champion point guard, whether it's a pass-first point guard or a more typical current NBA scoring point guard? Will they go get a point guard?
Yeah, I think that's a big question. I also saw some people are throwing out the Celtics right now as a potential landing spot for Bradley Beal. And I think that's interesting because, again, he's not your typical point guard, but he's a guy who in a regular season has averaged 5-6 assists before in the regular season as a secondary playmaker. So when you combine Marcus Smart when you combine Bradley Beal and you combine Jayson Tatum, is that enough ball handling to kind of get you through it? My argument would be, yeah, you're probably going to make it through the regular season pretty well. But again, when it comes down to those, that game 7 when you can lock in and the defensive matchups become something that you can break down film wise, I still just think it comes down to a point where you need somebody that can consistently run your offense and get you in and out of possessions cleanly. And if you want to extrapolate this just away from the Celtics, look at how different the Suns would looked when they had a healthy Chris Paul and when they didn't. And you can look at it last year or this year. And how much differently their offense, would come and go when there was just a consistent hand at the wheel.
Well, and this is probably too old school, but I think the Celtics have enough firepower that if they did find it, I don't have a name for you, but if they did find a pass first guy to run the show, I think that takes them up another notch.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, just if you want to look at just kind of how just stark it was in the regular season over the last few years, Jayson Tatum's assist totals are last 3 years. That's when he made his jump. Are 3, 4, and 4.5. That's in the regular season, respectively. In the playoffs, so it goes from 3, 4 to 4.5. In the playoffs, it goes 5 assists, 4.5 assists, and then 6.2. So if you look at the jump he's already had to make in being a passer in the playoffs up to this point, he made an even bigger jump in this postseason. And yeah, the turnovers came alongside it, but he had 150 assists and he had 100 turnovers, and that's about the rate that he had been his entire season. He just upped the volume without being able to up the efficiency, which is literally the hardest thing to do in the NBA. When guys up the volume and up the efficiency, they win awards, and they get their first All-Pro seasons and things like that, or first team All-Pros or what have you. So I think people having this expectation and saying he blew it aren't looking at the context of what he was able to do, and how big those numbers really were, and how impressive it was that he was able to take a jump from the regular season to the postseason and add over 2 assists per game. And then when you consider the fact that he did that against a concentrated schedule of the Nets, Bucks, Heat, and then the Warriors. That's an insane jump for him to make. Again, was it enough? No, but I think that's too often the kind of argument we lose in these discussions is, yes, he made the jump. Was it enough? No, but that doesn't mean you can just scoff at it and ignore it. Yeah, he failed to win that finals series by being able to put a team on his back, but he had just turned 24, and had he done that, we would rightfully be, laying laurels at his feet and anointing him the next great one in the NBA, because that's how impressive it would have been. And so I think it's this weird thing where people want to knock him because he wasn't able to do it, where we would have anointed him where if he had. And I think maybe there's probably a middle ground in there where we can probably settle with kind of the future of Jayson Tatum after what he was able to do.
Let's switch to the West Coast and talk about Steph Curry, who had one bad game, and people were foolishly wondering, oh my gosh, is it the end? And finals MVP, 4-time champion. I mean, I really personally, and I say this honestly, he didn't have to win another playoff game for me to understand how great he is, where his legacy is. It just the legacy keeps getting bigger and deeper, and I think it's going to continue for a while. This is a team that I believe, Matt, is in really, really good shape, and I think they have a great chance to be even better.
Yeah, and really, it's one of those things where you can't answer this question by just looking at the numbers, because if you look at the numbers of what he did in this playoff run, yeah, it's preposterous. It's 28, 5-5 across the entire run of these playoffs. It's 31, 7-7 in just the finals. And that's the thing, is that he's done 37-7, 31-6-5, not 37-7, 31-6-5. He's done 37-7 in the finals, but people don't give him credit because he lost to the Raptors in that series. He's done 29-7-7, but people don't give him credit because that was in a series where Kevin Durant was also on his team. And so it's crazy to me that he has these stats, and now this is the finals that finally did it. And that's why the box score is never enough, because when you watch those games and you felt how polarizing Steph Curry was. Literally the man is a human magnet in just the way that everything had to bend around him and towards him and away from him in so many different ways. And that was the different feeling in those other finals, despite the fact that he was putting up numbers, at times it felt hollow and he felt beatable. And that was crazy because in the regular season he always felt unbeatable, and then all of a sudden he felt, it felt like that invincibility had kind of worn off. Well, it came back on in the series against the Celtics, and that was the most regular season we've ever seen him go off in the postseason. So it was earned.
Yeah.
Like he added to his legacy because that's just how we think about players now, especially in the NBA. But he didn't need it, and if anything, him, Clay, and Dre have just added to their legacy even more with the last 3 days. There's just something about the way teams celebrate now that it really just tells me a lot about them. Like if you go even slightly just not hard enough, I'm just like, you know what? I don't know if you really wanted it that much.
Get out of here.
This
Even though they won.
I'm being facetious. I'm not being serious. It's been a fun reaction from the Warriors and their parade the other day was hilarious. You have Dre shit talking everyone, which is crazy. And at one point he said no one believed in us, and it's like, okay, calm down. You guys were like the fourth best rate. Like you guys had like the fourth best Vegas rate numbers to win the finals when the playoffs started. People believe in you. Don't give me that crap. But it's, Dre's saying, it's F everybody always. Clay's so just like he's stumbling around. He's knocking over fans. He's dropping his rings. Steph is partying late into the night. There's pictures of him napping on the ground. He's dancing in crowds of people. It really was the perfect encapsulation of those three players was how they partied and celebrated their championship. Steph was being quiet and a man of the people. Clay was being ridiculous, goofy, and just like just the Clay up kind of person he is. And then Draymond Green was always in everything shit talking. And so it was the ultimate personification of those three players playing out across their celebration, which is, again, I love to see that. It's like Ovechkin in the fountain, or Pat Maroon screaming that he's a hometown hero at the Blues parade. How you celebrate your championship. I love seeing teams go full on, and after your fourth one, you'd think it would hit differently. But these guys were just in a completely different zone celebrating it. I thought it was fun. The Warriors, as they said it, the dynasty's back. I mean, at this point, as long as these guys stay healthy and, the knees for Clay, the ankles for Steph, and, just kind of his temper for Draymond, as long as these things stay healthy and unbroken, it's going to be another 2 or 3 years where these guys are going to be championship hopefuls because they got Poole and they got Wiseman if he ever figures it out. And they got Kuminga, and they got owners who are going to pay gobs of money in luxury tax to keep on winning for that fan base. It's insane how powerful the Warriors already feel and how different it is from a month ago when we really thought the Grizzlies had them on the ropes. And now fast forward a month later, and it's almost like the complexion of the NBA is completely different than it was going to be.
Before we move forward, you started to go forward there. I want to come back just a little bit. The one theme through the celebrations, and really beginning with the Warriors winning the game in Boston, and that is the Warriors, the impact winning had on them after the 2 disastrous years in between, and that it meant so much to them. And the emotion, the heartfelt emotion they displayed by winning after the trials and tribulations that they went through. I thought it was pretty special and made me really appreciate this club.
Yeah, and that's kind of it's again, they're not underdogs or anything like that, but there is kind of a crazy comeback feel to the story where it's like, usually comeback stories are mountaintop, mountaintop, Death Valley, then back to the mountaintop. And this team went to the stratosphere and then came back down, and they didn't necessarily hit rock bottom. They just kind of like languished, not, kind of 30,000 feet where the rest of us are living. They just kind of sat there for a couple of years and then shot back up to the stratosphere. They've changed the dynamic of the analogy, but it still fits in that there is a comeback feel to this Warriors team and what they were able to do. And again, the fact they were able to do this without their lottery pick and Wiseman being a huge part is just it almost feels cheating. Like it's one of those things where it feels kind of cheap that they were able to get a lottery pick inside of all this greatness, and then it feels insane and almost like they're cheating that they were able to get good again without needing to utilize him. And it's just another round of the Warriors kind of feel like they're fixing the league, which feels very 2019ish.
The other thing about them coming back is they really didn't get healthy until the playoffs began.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that defense in the regular season looked great, but Steph Curry injury at the end of the year made you really wonder if they could do anything. If he had a rough go at things, Clay did not look great at first coming back from the injury, and then we literally talked about in the finals for the first 2-3 games about Draymond being a liability for them offensively and not good enough for them defensively. And then he flips the switch and completely changes it in the last 3 games to put, the kind of final stretch on a championship. And again, that was a guy who had been struggling for weeks, and all of a sudden he finally has a solid offensive game. That is that kind of championship mentality. That's the things you can't account for, just by looking at a box score, just by crunching numbers. And the fact that when everything came down to it and this team was staring down the barrel of another 16, win 16 games and change your kind of career's trajectory, they were able to lock in and produce in a way that they hadn't for the majority of the season. And again, relatively, where they were able to perform in the majority of the regular season was third best record in the league, second best defense, but yet there was still just something missing. And we saw that something kind of come back in the playoffs, and that was the difference between them being, an out in the second or third round and them, raising up that 4th title.
You touched on a couple of things about what the Warriors can be moving forward. You mentioned a draft, a lottery pick they didn't need. The other thing that some people aren't talking about with Poole being just a kid. He's just a kid.
Yeah, and to see his growth and to see him have some very tough moments in the first 2 or 3 games, be a complete liability defensively, and have that be a mentality thing where because he couldn't get anything going and was bad defensively, he couldn't get in his groove offensively, and then they just kind of fed off each other in a negative way. To completely flip the switch on his game and almost the exact kind of time frame that Draymond Green did within the finals, that was unbelievably impressive. Then you add that to the fact that he starts the season really in the G League with Santa Cruz, and then he explodes into the player he became. That's unbelievable, and that's why this Warriors dynasty has always been a little bit different. And that's why they were able to reload, because it's never been just a team that can spend a lot of money over the luxury tax. That's a factor, but again, it was good drafting in the mid to late lottery with guys like Klay Thompson and Steph Curry, then great drafting later with guys like Draymond Green, who was a second-round pick, and then being able to augment that again with a Jordan Poole, but then also, again, the Jonathan Kumingas, the Juan Toscano Anderson, those kind of players that they've been able to augment the team with. Heck, no one talks about it, but that very first championship, Festus Ezeli, who was like a second-round pick for them out of Vanderbilt, the center, he was really good for them right until the NBA went super small. He was like their center after Andrew Bogut, and he was a solid player for them. And it's just kind of being able to get those kind of players in and out consistently around that core of Draymond, Steph, and Clay. I mean, I think people have forgotten how important Harrison Barnes actually was to that very first title team. He was really good and very important in their ability when they kind of when he was their 4 and Draymond kind of became the 5. He was super important. And so it's always kind of been a homegrown team in a lot of ways that's been able to augment and get those final killers in trades or for agents. Now, for the first championship, it was Andre Iguodala and Andrew Bogut, and for the other championships, it was Kevin freaking Durant. But nonetheless, the core and the base and the system around it is what builds those players, and that's why I think you see so much consistency and why they've been able to reload in different ways.
Let's talk a little bit about some other stories in the NBA as we move to closer to Thursday's NBA draft. you had talked about Beal, Bradley Beal, and the Celtics. If he went there, I would love it as a fan. I'm not sure that's the winning formula they need, but it'd be great to have two great St. Louis players on the same team. Um, in your mind, are there more realistic landing spots for him, including staying in DC?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Bradley Beal is, and going into this NBA season, there's pretty much about 23 teams could clear cap for Bradley Beal. I mean, there's not a lot of teams that are that stretched or to the point where they're that
Yeah.
inflexible where they couldn't make up the cap for Bradley Beal. So the Celtics could do it. It would take some weird, maneuvering from them. The Celtics could do it, but I just don't know how viable that actually is. And if you're Brad Stevens, if you're Ime Udoka, you're probably going into this next season thinking that if we just have two or three good players on the back end who can be 3-and-D defenders, we're probably winning a championship. So they're probably not thinking in the go big or go home, go bust kind of mindset that would lead to a Bradley Beal trade. But they could swing it. Like I said, pretty much almost every NBA team could. I think the Sixers would have been live, but I think it looks like James Harden's actually going to stay. That's kind of shocking to me. Miami's one where you want to talk about a team going big and going home, making the big swing for Beal, making him the second key cog on a championship-winning team as his talent level kind of tells you what he could be. I think Miami could be really good. You get more ball handling, you get more three-point shooting, those kind of things. I think that would be another great one. I think there's obviously a chance that he could definitely stay in Washington. Listen, they don't want to just completely give up on it, and with what they got going, Hachimura, some other young players over the last couple drafts, obviously, I'm blanking on. I'm completely blanking on the name of the coach. I'm so sorry, Earl. Earl's cousin.
Oh,
I'm blanking on the coach. Junior. Wes Unseld Jr. It's completely blanking on the name. They got a good young coach. They got good young players. So maybe they try to take one more run at it with Bradley Beal. I wouldn't be completely opposed to that. Last year was one of the more watchable and least annoying Washington Wizards teams. Since they've been good like 5 or 6 years ago. Scott Brooks was an atrocious basketball team to try to watch Bradley Beal on. Even last year when he was going off for 30 per game, it was rough to watch any minute where he wasn't in the freaking game. And then I think there's some teams out west. Listen, if you're the Lakers. I don't know why they're talking about Kyrie Irving when they could be talking about Bradley Beal. I think Bradley Beal would make a lot more sense than a Kyrie Irving.
And so
and now we can talk about the offseason because LeBron James is going to make some wild ass trade.
Moves.
So it's the offseason. Here we go. It's all Lakers again, baby. The Warriors and the rest of the NBA got 2 weeks, and now we're back to the Lakers.
We'll probably do an NBA draft preview. And LeBron and sometimes doesn't seem like a patient guy.
Oh no!
Seeing who anybody gets, and maybe some deals on Thursday night. I think it's going to be a pretty interesting night.
Oh, I love the NBA draft
more than ever.
Yeah, I NBA draft is low key fun because it's. Sometimes you're gonna have guys who aren't gonna make like an impact in the league for like 5 or 6 years, and then you have guys who are gonna be all stars in year one and things like that. So I think they could make some moves. Obviously, this year they're kind of screwed. I'm pretty sure because the Anthony Davis trade, they don't have a first round pick this year, and I think next year the Pelicans can swap it. So they're not really going to get much help in the draft.
And then you got some teams that have 4 picks, I think, including couple teams with 3 first round picks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe the Thunder are one of them. Yeah.
Look who's gonna take advantage and bounce back quick. The Spurs.
I mean, the Spurs are always liable to bounce back quick. I mean, when you look at what they've been able to do, heck, Derek White I always thought was a great example of what the Spurs are able to do. Now, obviously, he's doing it now for the Celtics, but Derek White, being able to find players in 20 and later is a huge thing, and I know the Spurs actually have 2 picks in the 20s, so if they are able to hit it with any kind of consistency, they're able to. They've been able to in the past. That could be big for them. Obviously, I think a team like the Rockets is going to be fun. Is going to be interesting to watch. They have so many young players. They have a top 3 pick, and they also have a top 20, it's like 23 or something like that. So watching teams like that be able to kind of like latch in and get two young players to add to Jalen Green and the young core they're building up. I mean, they moved Christian Wood, which I thought was weird, but that's a very we suck and we're not going to be good for another 4 years kind of move. But yeah, there's so many teams with multiple picks. There's so many different ways you can go. I really think you could have some bad teams this past year, get one or two moves really changed around. I mean, the Trailblazers we never talked about this year, they obviously have a lot of potential. The Pacers, I think, could kind of jump up and bite some teams in the ass and be kind of surprised. And then you mentioned already the Spurs, and I would say the Pelicans as well. They just have, I mean, we're just talking about teams with so much young talent kind of packaged at once, as well as having some good young players like the Trailblazers having a Damian Lillard. If they can add to that, it'll be really interesting. And then obviously free agency. What's going to be the big domino? Is there a big name that LeBron's going to bring to LA and kind of change things? Then you have other things. I mean, there were some big dominoes that never really fell in this NBA season that could completely change the complexion of next year. The LA Clippers. I mean, that is such a huge wild card. We didn't get a chance to really talk about Kawhi Leonard and Paul George the way that we really should have been able to the entire season just because of their injuries. So if those guys are able to both come back, now we got the LA Clippers who are going to add to the fray completely differently. Is Michael Porter Jr. going to be healthy next year? And how does that make the Denver Nuggets more of a fun team to talk about because of what Nikola Jokic is able to do and more of an actual, we're having these conversations not because Nikola Jokic is fun and I'm obsessed, but because this is a legitimate title contender. Are the Spurs able to bounce back? Can the Minnesota Timberwolves build on what they were able to do in the first round of the playoffs? Can the Memphis Grizzlies kind of form some of that grit that you have to learn in the playoffs to form yourself into a better team? And I think maybe the most interesting thing, we talked about it a little bit when it first ended in the playoffs, the DeAndre Ayton saga in Phoenix. It kind of damped down, kind of got tamped down after they got eliminated and the finals took over. But it's low key insane that's a question mark going forward, the future between the Suns and DeAndre Ayton. So that's another big thing where that could go two ways, where the Suns are going to be a great team next year even if Ayton's not there. So how do they augment that? How do they change their team around without DeAndre Ayton? And two, what other team out there in the ether gets DeAndre Ayton and potentially goes from being a mid-range team or a 7th or 8th seed and maybe jumps up into a bigger echelon because they finally get a game-changing big like that? There's a lot of different things that are going to fall in the NBA offseason. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I guarantee you the least exciting thing is going to be what the Lakers do. I'm so unimpressed. I'm so unexcited. I have no expectation for them to actually make the smartest move. If they're big, coup de grace, LeBron's back, and this is his final run at a championship, is Kyrie freaking Irving, I will laugh my ass off. He's amazing, but I mean, after everything that happened in Cleveland, to go through everything in Boston and go through everything in Brooklyn, just to find your way back to LeBron's side in LA, that is the most soulless, uninteresting storyline I can possibly think of.
Unless it's another story of redemption. No, it's not redeemable. Never mind.
It's like if Barry Bonds had won a World Series at some point, would it have been a redemption? It would have been just oh, okay, well that's good for you. I don't know. It's okay. You're incredible at your sport. We're aware of that. You're kind of unfun though. Literally, he's one of those players who, despite being otherworldly and doing things that as a sport fan should make your jaw hit the floor and go, oh my God, this guy is, I just want to watch him play this sport. Everything around him is it's just so stupid, the vortex around him, that it just kind of takes away the fun of the game. And I'm not sure. Bonds is one of the few things I'm thinking of. And honestly, I'm not saying Kyrie Irving's cheating with steroids or anything like that, but he just seems like kind of a fun suck. And he just seems kind of I'm playing basketball and I hate all these fans and everyone hates me for doing it. Oh, okay, oh no. I'm not saying shut up and dribble, but don't be mad when I also make fun of the dumb things you say.
On that note, we'll set up for the NBA draft to talk to everybody in a couple of days and see if some things lay out. A quick teaser from me. And it happens every year. It's not like I'm looking at a crystal ball. But I think this draft, as I just kind of look at what scouts are saying, I think could be I think there's going to be some disastrous early picks.
Really?
Disastrous.
Oh, I'm really excited to hear this because I'm kind of upset. I kind of love. I mean, let's say the top 5 is Holmgren, Smith, Banchero, Jaden Ivey, and then Keegan Murray. I love all 5 of those players, and if any of them aren't good, I'll be honestly shocked. Which means I've definitely just jinxed at least 3 of them to have horrible NBA careers.
This is the last thing I'm going to say content-wise on the show before we say goodbye. How do you play in the NBA with no shoulders? on that note, it's the 2-man game here on Claves Online. We'll get you ready for the NBA draft in a couple of days. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next time.
I'm sorry, Chad.
From our roots in St. Louis, Royal Banks of Missouri is branching out to continue serving you with our locations in St. Charles, Jerseyville, Granite City, and now in Hannibal, Center, and New London. Royal Banks of Missouri, the community bank in your community.
St. Louis Acura has almost 200 pre-owned vehicles in stock with inventory arriving daily and can offer the best trade-in value. While others raise their prices and fees, we choose to earn your repeat and referral business by not taking advantage of the current market situation. We invest in our team, becoming one of St. Louis's top places to work and fastest growing companies. St. Louis Acura remains committed to becoming better than ever for you. Located at Manchester and Mason Roads.